Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversation. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
When we think of spirituality and personal growth, do we typically think about non-fiction stuff, therefore it must be serious? What if it can be entertaining? At least that's what I'm discovering. You've probably watched one or probably even several of the Star Wars movies. Guess what? Those aren't just entertaining science fiction films. They're also powerful stories that teach a lot of really deep spiritual lessons and lessons about the life story, taken from Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. So, if we can learn all kinds of powerful spiritual and personal growth truths from watching Star Wars, how else can we be enlightened and entertained at the same time? What if they're not different subjects? What if they go together? I've got a whole series of enlightening and entertaining stories, including The Saturn of Utopia, The Hand That Tells Time, and a whole lot more, all at growthfarming.com. Go check it out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Whole Living Show. And as you saw that wonderful video there, our guest here today is D. Grant Smith, and he was talking about spirituality and being able to see that in different places. And I love that he mentioned a movie because I am a huge Marvel fan. I absolutely love it. But there are definitely stories in the Marvel movies that have some spiritual connections. So I'm going to get into this with D. Grant Smith because we want to talk about how you can find things that can help you in your everyday life and in your entertainment and some of the things you see around you. So I love that he mentioned that. We're going to get into that, but I want to read you his bio, everybody, because he's absolutely amazing. His name is D. Grant Smith, as I mentioned, and he is known as the Growth Farmer, helping people grow in love and healthy relationships through the inner garden inside of the mind and heart. An avid storyteller, maybe he will tell us a story here today, writer, speaker, and coach. He is the author of Be Solid, How to Go Through Hell and Come Out Whole. And we are on the Whole Living Show, so he's going to teach us some tools about how to come out whole. This chronicles his journey into wholeness and self-love after experiencing soul-crushing heartbreak and divorce. Using metaphors and storytelling as a vessel for transformation, he helps people see the greatness within and provides the resources and tools to transform the way you live your life by fully believing in yourself and operating as the love that you are. He continuously writes powerful short stories and parables that communicate deep spiritual truths for healing, personal growth, and stronger relationships that he shares on his platform. The deeper lessons on the power of love are aspects of his teachings and training programs. Both stories and teaching lessons are found at growthfarming.com, where he is building a community of spiritual and creative people who are committed to living their best life. He, as mentioned above, he's an author, but has multiple books. So you want to make sure that you go to the growth farming platform that combines fictional storytelling in spirituality and personal growth with teachings in those areas. And without further ado, everybody, so that we can get into the conversation, we are going to bring in D. Grant Smith. I want you to give him a virtual round of applause. Hello, hello.
Oh, thank you for that beautiful and very I'm so honored introduction, Tracy. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And we listen, I always tell it myself on this show, right? Because I feel like, transparency is key in the world. Life has been really full. And I had an opportunity to connect with D. Grant on another show, which he was introduced by my coach, and he was amazing on that show. So when my coach said, you know what, you should have him on your show, I'm like, absolutely. It was no thought, didn't give it a second thought. And I haven't had the opportunity to connect with him since then because life has been so full. But you can see just based on his video how amazing he is. So I want to get into this conversation with him because I love that you talked about the spirituality and how you can see it in different places if you're looking for it, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a strange little caveat, but sometimes we can find things that we're not necessarily looking for as well. Like you mentioned being a big Marvel fan. I'm a huge Marvel fan as well.
Yeah.
And there's, man, in all of the Avengers movies and the individual iterations and the, sequences like Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, all of those have all kinds of really powerful spiritual nuggets. And sometimes, let's go Marvel. Sometimes we can watch something in a film and it's after the movie's over where it starts to impact us and we start to think about it in a different way. And I think that it doesn't really matter whether or not we're reading a book and then it hits us or watching a movie and then it hits us. The fact that it's hitting us is, in my opinion, the divine God trying to knock on our door in a different sort of way and saying, hey, I tried these other ways to get your attention, but maybe I can try this way. Maybe you'll pay attention now.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that it comes through messages in things that we think are just, the normal everyday thing that we would do, or, going to the movies because there's a release out for a new movie, right? But then, having that either forethought, right? Especially if you're a Marvel fan, you might have a forethought, or if it's an afterthought, just where you have some spiritual experience. So talk to us a little bit about maybe one that was significant for you, and I'm sure there's a lot, but give us a spiritual experience that you've had from, either a movie, a show, everyday life.
Yeah. So one of my favorite shows to watch now is The Mandalorian. Have you watched that at all?
I have not seen that. Heard of it, but haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, the whole Baby Yoda thing was a huge trend for a little while, but I'm actually in the process of writing a Western novel that's called The Man with the Golden Guns. And I'm approaching the aspect in the understanding of the hero's journey, which I referenced in the video, but doing it in a different way. But I've been watching The Mandalorian again. I went back and started rewatching the whole series again before the start of the third season. And I watched one episode and it just resonated with me on such very powerful levels. Part of the reason why I started rewatching The Mandalorian is I think it's the most perfect example of how to take multiple genres and squeeze them together and have still a cohesive story. So you get kind of these spaghetti Western dynamics that take place also inside this very science fiction universe with spaceships and bombs and all kinds of stuff. And then you've got this samurai dynamic with the whole Jedi thing. But in one of the episodes from the first season, so if you guys have watched The Mandalorian, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'll try not to give any spoilers away here. But Din Djarin is the Mandalorian. He doesn't like droids. Now, we all know what droids are. They're the C-3PO, R2-D2 kind of robots. And early on in the first 2 episodes, I think, he's trying to basically save Baby Yoda. And he comes into a shootout with this battle droid named IG-11. And he wins. Well, later on in the season, he comes back into contact with this droid and he's like, get that thing away. It's programmed to kill the child. And the guy that's with him is a little alien dude named Krill. And he says, no, that was his original programming, but I've reprogrammed him. That's not his training anymore. And he's like, I don't care. You can say that he's reprogrammed, but I know what these things are. They're designed to do this thing. He's designed to kill. And this was a spiritual thing that hit me, because Krill says, will you trust me? And he goes, yes. And he goes, okay. When I found him, he was just a shell. I brought him back. I had to rewire everything on the inside of him. I had to reprogram him from the inside out. And then you're watching the sequence of events, and the robot is having to, it's like a baby again. It's having to relearn how to walk step by step, falls down, relearn how to pick things up, keeps dropping stuff all over the place. And what Krill said is, I had to teach him everything all over again through repetition and affirmation. And the spiritual thing that went off of me is, this is the rewriting of our story on the inside of our subconscious minds. Because we get programmed a certain way when we're children to, this is the way the world works. This is who you are. This is the way God is. This is the way other people are. And then that becomes the way that we unconsciously live our lives. And to change that inner story, what do? Repetition, affirmation, repetition, affirmation. And it is a growing process, and we make a lot of mistakes. And the other thing that Krill said, he's like, I gave it endless patience. And that was another thing, was like, dude, you are so hard on yourself at not getting things the first time. That you reprogram the Ep11 inside of you to go from being angry and vengeful all the time, and why aren't things working out for me, to being loving and gentle and kind, is repetition, affirmation, and endless kindness. And so, I mean, I think this is an example of a very powerful spiritual truth that if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, will hit us right where we are.
Yeah. And I know we had a comment out there from Mr. Saccone Prince. We thank you for joining, but he talked about being open to hear. So when you're open to hear those messages, right, they'll come through. But I love what you talked about, because it just made me think about our connection with God. If you have that spiritual connection, and when you said, Krill said, will you trust me? Right. And that's what God is saying to us all the time. So I love that you said that. And it makes so much sense. And I haven't seen the show, but now I'm curious, right? I was watching a show called Nightfall. Excuse me, losing my voice here. I was watching a show called Nightfall on Netflix. Excuse me, goodness gracious. Thank you for the love. and it was about the Knights Templar. And, how they struggle with, doing what God is telling them to do versus, just things that are happening in the world, and battling with themselves about that. And I love that you talked about that reprogramming, right? Because that's what God wants us to do, reprogram with him, right? And change our wiring in our brains and in our hearts, right? And then I love the repetition and the affirmations that go with that. So, so much there. I'm gonna go and watch the show now because of it. I love that. So talk a little bit about what growth farming is all about, and how. First, tell us how it came about.
Okay.
And talk to us about what it's all about.
Yeah. So that's a fun story. I have to do a little bit of math in my mind. About 7 years ago, I was challenged by my coach to do something. At the time, I was working in the music space, and I was the relationship guy and helping musicians build relationships within the industry, within their fan base, and with other influencers in the space. And so my coach challenged me he's like, you're the relationship guy. Why don't you reach out, pick 2 people that you think are so far above you in terms of their level of success that there's no way in the world you could ever connect with them. But just challenge yourself to think about things a little bit differently. Ironically, he was challenging me to do something that I'm doing now way before I ever got to the place. So one of the people that I thought of reaching out to is Seth Godin. And if you guys aren't familiar with him, he is, I think he's got 20 best-selling books. Now he's primarily in business and marketing, but interestingly enough, what's pervasive across all of Seth's writing and his books and his blog and everything is the power of story. And so I had been a member of his email list. Seth sends an email to his list at 4:00 in the morning.
I think he's the only person in the whole space that does that. But you're going to see his. So I was waking up to his emails in the morning, and one day I had this thought that being in this entrepreneurial space, oftentimes it can feel like being in a desert because it's like there's this kind of barren land that's in front of us. We have dreams about getting to the promised land because we've heard all the big gurus and experts say, well, if you'll do this, then you can have endless clients and endless money and endless opportunities and all this stuff. And so we follow their bandwagons and end up going around in circles, much like the Israelites did in Egypt in searching for the promised land. And what I was feeling was, Seth never makes a big promise. If you do this thing and then this thing and this thing, if you just, follow this bandwagon approach, if you jump on Facebook and do all these things, if you jump on Instagram or TikTok or fill in the blank, he never says any of that stuff. What he does is he gives a little anecdote. It's kind of a different way of looking at something, challenging you to think about the same sort of thing from a different perspective. I thought, you know what? Seth is kind of like Moses in this endless desert. And he's not telling me that I need to jump on the new bandwagon way of doing things. He's saying, hey, take one step in this direction. And so I thought, well, okay. So my coach had given me that challenge. And I thought, okay, I'm going to reach out to Seth Godin and just see what happens. Take off the expectation, whatever. Well, I went to his website, and his website said, Seth doesn't do personal appearances, and he doesn't do private coaching. But if you want to contact him, here's his email address. All of the other big gurus across the board never give their email address out. And I thought, that's really interesting and very uncommon. And I'm very big about the uncommon.
Yeah.
So
can I ask you one question before you go on? Because you said something in there. You said, take off the expectation. And I wanted to know why. Why did you say take off the expectation?
Well, because I was telling myself a negative story all the time.
Okay.
And the negative story that I was saying was, this isn't going to work. And that was part of my inner narrative that I've been in a steady process of rewriting for the past several years. This isn't going to work. Nobody's going to care, blah, 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 blah. Which is interesting because considering being the relationship guy, I'm telling myself this negative story all the time that is very anti-relationship. So I was looking on his website for what else it said that he didn't do, because I didn't want to, I was going to email him, but I didn't want to cross any sort of, line or whatever. This is 2016. His website didn't say anything about not doing podcast interviews. So I thought, well, I'm going to give him just a big thank you. But what if I allowed myself the permission in a way to say, I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but I had a podcast. I have a podcast now. I had a different podcast at the time.
Okay.
Say, my audience would love the opportunity to learn from you. Would you be open to it? And just creating that invitation. So what I did was, when I emailed him, I basically said what I told you I was thinking when I was reading his emails. I said, every day I read your message and it feels like you're Moses in this proverbial desert saying, take one step in this direction. You'll get to the promised land this way. And it's very different than all of the other big, guru people that are out there. And so I just want to say thank you for being a proverbial Moses in this gigantic entrepreneurial desert, because I felt like I've been wandering around for a long time and you give me hope. And then I said, your website doesn't say anything about you not doing podcast interviews. Would you be willing to join me? So I hit send, and I didn't expect to get anything back. But 3 minutes later, I had a reply. And Seth Godin replied to me and said, thank you so much for your kind words. I normally don't do podcast interviews, but you have me intrigued. What are you doing on Tuesday? And so I had a conversation with Seth Godin, and there were a couple of really cool things about that. One, he had a sinus infection the weekend before, and he was still taking medication while we were talking. You could hear him kind of crinkling a throat lozenge. And he told me, he's like, forgive me if I'm a little nasally. I had a sinus infection, but I wanted to keep my appointment with you. And I thought, in the terms of like big name people, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people know who this guy is. at this stage in my life, I haven't gotten to that level yet.
Yeah.
I hadn't gotten to that level in 2016, but he still chose to honor me as though I was somebody on par with him.
Right.
And I was so honored by that. But you asked where the growth farming thing came from. The question that I asked him to conclude the entire conversation is, and you can hear this conversation, by the way, I've republished it on my current podcast.
Podcast. Very nice. Yeah.
It's the Growth Farming Podcast. It's the most recent episode. And I republished the conversation that we had, and then I go back into some specific points that he made and really break down what it is that he was communicating in that. But the last question that I asked him is, what is one piece of advice you would give to somebody for them to take one step in the direction of their promised land? And what he said would change my life forever. He said, it's the idea that the grass is always greener on the other side that gets us into trouble. What we need to see is we have all the green grass that we need right now. What we need to do is farm it and not go hunting. And most of us spend so much of our lives hunting after what it is that we want instead of learning how to grow what it is that we already have access to within us. And that is love and divine guidance.
Yeah. And when you think about the hunting portion of that, right, that's temporary, right? If you think about the farming and the growth, you know, that provides longevity. And I'm not just talking about for our generation, but for generations to come, right? So I love that he said that analogy. We do a show called Fem Talk, and we had a woman on last night named Dr. Angel Cade. And when you just talked about Seth, kind of opening your mind to being an entrepreneur in a way that nobody else had, the conversation that, not even the conversation, the gifts that she shared last night, opened up a whole new world around just entrepreneurship and life in general too, right? And how you operate in that space. But I love that part of it when you can think about growing and farming and sowing, right? Those seeds in the ground that will live on forever, even after you're gone, like your podcast for one, right? But I love that. So now you said how it came about, now what's happening with growth farming? What are you doing inside that community?
Yeah, well, it took years to actually put the pieces together for myself. And that maybe this is your story too, Tracy. I think it's most people's stories. We go through a sequence of events and different kinds of transformation. And the pieces are not always articulated for us ahead of time. So, we're able to connect, as Steve Jobs said, we're able to connect the dots looking backwards. We can never connect the dots looking forwards. So 2016, I had that conversation with Seth. It planted that seed in my mind. But the only growth farming related thing I did at all was I just gave myself that subtitle, called myself the Growth Farmer. In 2017, I went through divorce. My whole world got turned upside down. And that was, it was the most painful thing I experienced at the time. But it was also the catalyst for my spiritual awakening. So it was in just a place of feeling like I was utterly worthless, that God came and spoke to me and said, you don't know what love really is.
Wow.
You don't know how to love yourself. And that is the true cause of your pain. It's not the person that left. It's your misunderstanding and misinterpretation and misapplication of what love is. And I had been a hunter. I had gone out and I tried to hunt for approval and acceptance and love. And I was trying to constantly prove myself and my worthiness to other people because I thought they were the source, but they're not. And it was coming to that realization and yes, that awareness it totally changed my life. And so I spent that year and the following year writing the book that I mentioned, or that you mentioned in the introduction, Be Solid, How to Go Through Hell and Come Out Whole. And that is it's my story in learning about what love is, what I did to heal my heart and my mind, change my life. And I draw a lot of metaphoric references. I do a lot of storytelling in that, even though I didn't consider myself a storyteller at the time, I would have stories in it. And because the idea
lo and behold, right, look what comes out of your experiences, right? And
Yeah.
you talked about the hunting there too, like hunting for more kind of approval, right? That is what it sounded like to me. But again, temporary. So keep going. I just wanted to mention that.
So I published that story or that book in 2019, and you can find that one on Amazon. The other books that I have at growthfarming.com are only available at that website.
Mhm.
I'm not publishing everything on a wide spectrum because
Mhm.
what I really want to do, I don't get to see who buys Be Solid through Amazon.
Right.
I don't get to have a conversation with them. I don't get to ask them questions. I don't get to help them or even just learn about their stories.
Yeah.
But when you come directly to me and you buy directly from me, we get to have conversation about that.
Mhm.
And so it was just last year that I put the pieces together for myself. Hey, storytelling and personal growth are not two different subjects. They're
Mhm.
actually the same thing. They can
Mhm.
come together and work in harmony with each other. And not only that, I can build a community of people that are like myself, that have had some traumatic experiences in their life, maybe
Mhm.
have felt misunderstood or ostracized, or consider themselves too weird and like distant from everybody else. When we're all weird, we all have interesting things about us, and all weird means is interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
And I got to stop you here too, because I want to use an example there. I have a teenager who's in high school, and they normal teenagers go through the normal teenage things, and the hormones and everything. But I said to him, I'm like, everybody's feeling the same way in high school. Everybody feels weird in high school, right? So I wanted to use that analogy of like the kids at that age, because everybody's weird, like you said. And I just wanted to emphasize that for anybody out there struggling with something, everybody's weird.
well, I'm still weird. I've embraced my weirdness.
Yeah.
I think our individual weirdness is part of our superpowers.
Exactly.
So yeah, I've been building a community of people there that are invested in their personal growth. And I've kind of shifted the way that I talk about what this is. So for me, I'm the growth farmer for personal development through the lens of spirituality and storytelling. And like you and I talked about already with looking at the Marvel movies and looking at Star Wars and looking at all these other different things, I've been in the process of writing a ton. And by ton, I literally mean that. I think I wrote 40 stories, short fiction novels last year.
Wow.
And so I'm slowly publishing them. And in my stories, I tell some very deep spiritual truths and very powerful personal growth perspectives to help the reader look at their own story in a different way. And I believe that the stories that I've written didn't originate from me. I'm basically a channel and a vessel for the divine to speak some very powerful things, and I'm just the one that's writing it down. And
Yeah.
so the most recent story that I've published, when you go to growthfarming.com and you click on stories, the very first book that's there is a story called Hope Flows. And what begins as a murder mystery turns into a completely different story by the time you get to the end of it. And it really is about allowing hope to come alive inside of you and to flow through you and to transform the way you see yourself.
And is that typical of your stories where it looks like there's something like detrimental that's going to happen in the beginning and then kind of blossoms into
I don't know that I mean, truthfully, when I started writing that story, I wanted to give murder mystery a try. And so that's how it began. But like I said, I'm a vessel. So what it morphed into was something different than what I anticipated it being. You
Yeah.
mentioned, we've talked a little bit about Star Wars. There's another story that's on the site in the story section. It's called The Harmony Ship. And that is a very Star Wars influenced and inspired story. It's also in a way inspired by, I think I got the idea from it after watching Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. Okay.
I was imagining Peter Quill as the lead character. But the whole premise of the story is he is a pilot, and he's talking with the hero of the basically kind of like the Star Wars universe, the rebellion's victory over the Empire. And she, female pilot, she meets him and at a bar or something like that, and they're having a conversation, and she's intrigued at the fact that he's not treating her like a superstar celebrity. and fawning over her. He's just having a casual conversation with her, and he's intriguing and he's interesting. And he says, "Hey, you and I have known each other since we were kids." And she's like, "Prove it." So they go to his ship, and he's got this artifact. But they end up having this conversation, and she notices when she gets to his ship that the outside of it is perfectly immaculate, like a fine car, like a Bentley from like 1950. Doesn't have a scratch on it, and she's like, "How has this thing flown through space and been in all these wars and stuff and doesn't have any dents on it?" So then he begins to tell her, "Well, this isn't a regular ship. This is a harmony ship. And the ship knows things that I don't. And so I surrender to the ship and trust it in navigating. But if I try to take control and try to tell it where it's going to go, I get us in all kinds of trouble." And it's a metaphor for how we live our lives and how we operate. Because if we are led by our spirits, our intuition, it will take us exactly where we need to go, and it will keep us from going through things that we don't need to go through. But if we try to take over and operate out of our egos, all kinds of terrible things can happen.
Yes, I love it. So you have me intrigued too, but I'm going to ask you a question and we'll answer this after the commercial break. But I'm just intrigued because I love the way that story shapes into something different. And then you start to talk about, harmony and allowing, and I'm going to say spirit, right? Allowing spirit to kind of take over and navigate the ship. So the analogies that are coming up for me when it comes to like God and spirit and your story it's connecting. But I want to know from you how your stories morph, like when those messages come in, and you're like, "Oh, this needs to go in this direction because this is the message that I need to give to people." Don't answer it yet. I want you to think about it while we're doing the commercial break, and we're going to come back and talk about that. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and we are back from our commercial break. If you are just joining us, you want to make sure that you go back and watch the beginning of the show. It's been absolutely amazing. And we're talking spirituality with D. Grant Smith and storytelling, everybody. So right before the break, I asked D. Grant to just tell us how some of the messages come in when he's telling a story, when he's writing a story, and how that spirituality kind of intervenes, I guess, on behalf of everybody who needs to hear the story. So talk to us about how those messages come through.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know ahead of time. That was kind of one of the things I mentioned earlier about like getting out of my own way. When I've sat down and tried to make a story happen, I'm really frustrated with that process. And it's a grueling process, and it's not fun. What's fun for me is to actually get up and go for a walk, and a scene will pop into my mind. And that's really what it ends up being like. I wrote a novel last year in 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
Long novel, 25 chapters. And I'd had a concept sort of in my head for about 7 years, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I'm on a walk one day, and suddenly this movie starts playing in my mind. And I go for long walks. And so I went on this 1.5 hour long walk and watched this whole movie in my head playing. And I didn't stop it. And I was like, that's awesome. I've got to write this down. So I got back to my house, and I spent the next 8 hours writing everything that had come to me. But when I got to the end of it, I'm like, well, this isn't a short story like I thought it was going to be. This is going to be something much bigger.
Mm.
And I'd written 2 or 3 chapters, I guess.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the whole story in front of me. I had no idea what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it started coming to me in little nuggets along the way. And I think that's kind of, in a way, a metaphor for that whole thing. Like, we're able to connect the dots looking backwards.
Yeah.
We're not able to connect the dots looking forwards. And so in my own writing style, I let inspiration hit me. And then I start writing, and it comes to me in the process.
Mm.
But if I sit down and try to pick up where I've left off from a previous story, and I say, okay, well, this is the way it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm writing the thing that I think it's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
something changes, and I get a different idea. Like, no, it doesn't need to go in this direction. It needs to go in this direction. Try this out. And so the whole thing is an exploration, and the whole thing is a discovery for me, and I'm the guy writing the book.
Yeah, yeah. And how big is the surrender, right? Because it sounds like you just completely surrender to it, but how important is that?
I think it's essential. Again, in the times in my life when I've tried to be in control, especially in storytelling, and you know, I spent a long time. Now I write these little short, like I've got this write your story book that is writing prompts, and it's got keywords you're supposed to include in it. And I picked this up as a way to practice just improv storytelling. So I write in this at least 3 or 4 times a week. And after I write in here, I publish these little stories on my Medium site. But when I have sat down and tried to put a blog article together, or tried to sit down and like, today I'm going to write a story. Well, I end up doing this a lot because
your hands get really warm. Right?
I'm trying to make it happen. But when I sit down and I say, okay, even with this, like I'll look at the title, I'll look at the keywords, and I'll be like, so I have to ask myself a question: what could this be about? And I think maybe sometimes that's the start. What could this be about? And I don't know the whole thing ahead of time. The story that I wrote this morning started out in one kind of car chase scene. I inserted right into the middle of the car chase scene. By the time it was over, it was a completely different story. And I didn't know that was going to happen. I was just following where the trail led.
Yeah. So how clear do you have to be? Head space, heart space, environmental space, in order for those, pictures to come through? And I'll just describe them as pictures, but
yeah. So there's been times where I will, as I'm going to bed and I'm, praying and being grateful for the day and looking ahead at the future, I will say, it is my intention that tomorrow I'm going to write this thing, or tomorrow I'm going to do this thing. And sometimes it works that way, and sometimes it doesn't. And so I can resist the divine, God, Spirit, by trying to say, but no, my intention had been for this. Remember, this is my intention. Well, I don't really care what your intention is, dude.
Right.
Like, if this is the Harmony ship and you are the pilot that is submitted to the ship that actually knows everything in space that you can't see, are you going to really try to grab that control and maneuver this thing through and have it your way?
Yeah.
So how clear do I have to be? I think I just have to be willing, a willing vessel.
Yeah.
And sometimes the clarity is really strong. Sometimes it's not, but he is able to do, he, she, it. I don't give spirit a gender, is able to do much more than I could ask for and imagine if I'm just willing to surrender.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. I speak, and more recently of late, I've just been praying, through me, not from me, God, through me, not from me. And what comes out to me, it amazes me because it's so different from before when I'm stressing and trying to put content together and, just nervous and getting anxiety around it. And once I say through me, not from me, everything that comes out, that flows out, it's definitely not coming from me. And I was saying to someone before when I just recently did one, is I can't recreate that, because I don't really know exactly what came out until I see the footage from it, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the space that I love being in now. But before that, I was putting myself in the middle of everything. thing, right? And it just doesn't work. So once you surrender and you really realize that the message really shouldn't come from you anyway, it starts to flow. So I love that you write that way, because I know people that have written multiple books, right? And they stress really hard about, putting a book together and sitting down to complete the book and, put the chapters together. And, and if you just allow that flow and spirit to come through, you get, harmony, as you said. Harmony. I love it. So talk to us about, what some of the things that you have to offer, because we want people to know, what's on that growth farming site and what's in the community.
So there's a combination of things. There's a whole section of stories. Then I've got some courses that I've been releasing. One that is totally focused on confidence. And I took two things I taught before and I put them together. So it's called Confidence Like a Lion. I spent a lot of my life not being a confident person, being incredibly insecure and incredibly codependent. And like I was saying before, chasing after, trying to prove my worth and all this stuff. A lot of the things that I learned that kept me in a place of codependency and insecurity was I didn't believe in myself and I didn't know how to. And so sometimes part of this is having practical tools, but another part of it is making the decision. So here's a little story that actually ended up benefiting me in multiple ways. When I was like 27 years old, this is a while back, I was standing on a street corner. There was a guy that looked kind of rough and tumble, kind of thuggish on the other side of the road, and I thought he was going to jump me. I had no reason to, I had no basis for this thought, but like all the negative stories that kept popping up in my head telling me this is what's going to happen. I was like, well, crap, he's going to jump me. So I didn't go across the street like a normal human being would have. I went down a different street, took an extra 4.5 blocks, and I'm on block number 3, and I've justified it to myself saying, oh, well, I'm just going to get some extra exercise. This is going to be good for me. But my little internal Jiminy Cricket popped in and was like, dude, you're a grown man. You can't cross the street. How long are you going to live this way? And I decided in that moment, I'm tired of running. I'm tired of running from other people. I'm a fairly small frame person. I'm 5'7". I weigh 120 soaking wet. So I'm a bantamweight in boxing. And I say that because I joined a boxing gym to overcome my fear. And it was from that experience that I don't have that fear anymore. Does that mean I'm a badass fighter? No. But it means that I don't have those same inner negative thoughts going on in my mind. And I got the concept of be solid from my coach because that's what he talked about all the time. And I've learned that like in our self-concept, which is the inner narrative that we hold about ourselves, about other people, about God, and about the way the world works. And that's an inner story that was written before we were even able to put pen to paper and know the ABCs. To rewrite that story takes, like we talked about earlier, it takes repetition, affirmation, and endless patience. But it is a matter of we need to get solid with our inner story so that no matter what shows up in our outer reality, whether that's a relationship with a person or something at our job or some experience that we're having elsewhere, it doesn't rock us to our core. And so what I've been doing at growthfarming.com is, yes, writing stories that illustrate these points, putting together teachings that talk about the practical how-to application of this stuff, and also providing an outlet for people to come in and us interact with each other. And so regardless of what the membership level is that you're at, there's one that's just stories, and I do some behind-the-scenes looks at these stories, so there's teaching involved in that too. And in the middle tier, which is Harvest Vineyard, it is all the stories and all that stuff too, but I host and give a live weekly teaching and training that we do on Mondays. So that's a place where there's some very deep teaching that's involved. There's some very simple. I'm very big on simplicity. I don't like complicated stuff at all. And I don't like anything that's more than like 3 steps. So very simple, very practical, very easy to incorporate into your daily life application of this one thing. And then we discuss it as a group. And then there's Q&A time, but that's like, it's like a mastermind without the fluff and the hype, but mastermind geared towards spirituality and personal growth. And so I have all that stuff there too. And then I do a little bit of coaching. I don't advertise and market myself as a coach because I see myself more as a teacher. But for
Mhm.
people that really want to work one-on-one with me, I have that as an opportunity there. But what the membership does is it pulls you in to the community of people. So it's not just you go to this site and buy this one thing and then you're on your own to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm very much about like, let's garden together, because there's things that I'm going through in my life
Mhm.
that other people can help me out with too. I'm very big. I know we do the Ask the Expert show together with Lauren.
Yeah.
Honestly, Tracy, I don't believe in experts.
Yeah.
And I don't position myself as somebody that knows everything about anything. I'm
Yeah.
a constant student and I always will be. And
Yeah.
so inside the community, people teach me too. I'm just a conduit and a I don't know, somebody that's leading the way in some of these things that involve our spiritual development and our personal growth.
Yeah. And we're all experts at something, right? I would say all experts at something. Only from life experience, though. That's what I'm gonna put it in that regard. So you are an expert, D Grant.
I'll
At
receive
your
it
own
from you,
life
Tracy. Thank
experience.
you. Maybe that's a narrative that I need to change and edit inside myself.
Absolutely. Just from your own life experiences. And you know, when you come into, I love that you have community, because when you come into a community, right, and you start to collaborate, everybody learns. Everybody learns from everybody else. No matter how old or how young, there's always an opportunity to learn from somebody else. So we're all experts at something in life. So I just want to put that out there. But I want to say to you, also ask you, if you had to give somebody, you know, you said 3 steps. So I'm going to say 3 steps, 3 tools, just to understand their inner story. What would you say?
Well, I think that if you look at, so I like philosophy, and I'm a little bit of a philosopher, if you can't tell already.
Okay.
So one of my favorite teachers is a man named Neville Goddard.
Mhm.
Neville was alive in the 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s.
Mhm.
And he taught a lot of what would be considered now to be kind of the new thought movement, a lot of the law of attraction stuff that is very big now. He had kind of an alternate version of that. But one of his big teachings is a combination of psychology and spirituality. His interpretation of the Bible has totally revolutionized the way that I read the Bible. But one of the things that he talks about, and I think that this is a step in this direction for us to identify what our inner narrative is, his teaching is everyone is you pushed out. And what it means is whatever is going on in your life is a reflection back to you of something that you hold to be true on the deeper inner recesses of your mind. And so instead of blaming other people for treating you a certain way, in your meditation time, in your prayer time, ask God and ask yourself, what is being reflected back to me in my inner world that is coming from this external source?
I
And
love that.
when that happens, you will begin to see, well, you know, you tell yourself this story all the time.
Yeah.
You tell yourself this story all the time. You say that people are always abandoning you. You say that nobody ever shows up for you. And by the way, I'm saying you like that. These are inner stories that I have
Right.
been and am still in the process
Yeah.
of addressing and rewriting. And again, it takes repetition and affirmation and patience.
Yeah. Yeah.
But recognizing that, there's another tool, very simple, and I'll show you my favorite. I've got libraries all over my house, but all my favorite books that have helped me the most are right behind me. So this book is called Zero Limits: The Secret Hawaiian System for Wealth, Health, Peace, and More. Joe Vitale's got his name on it, but he didn't actually do much of the writing in this book. Really, the principles that come from this book came from Dr. Akiala Hu Lin. And Dr. Hu Lin taught about Ho'oponopono. It's a very, very simple practice. My friend sent me this beautiful mug that's got the Ho'oponopono prayer on it, so I see it all the time. What it is I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you.
Yeah.
And what Dr. Lin taught, which is kind of an alternate version of the traditional version, and this is the way that I practice it in my life. When something comes into my awareness that I don't like, instead of being angry at this person or blaming them or going down this road of bitterness, I think it's one thing to allow ourselves to feel anger and feel the feeling so they can leave you.
Right.
But once you've gone down that road, instead of carrying that stuff with you, clean and clear it out of your consciousness. And that's what the Ho'oponopono prayer does.
Yeah.
You can add things to it. After you say, for me, I say, I'm sorry, please forgive me for whatever is going on in my subconscious, unconscious, and conscious mind, as well as my heart, in my spirit, in my chakras, in my nervous system, in my energy field. I clean, and clear all of it out of me, as well as any connection from a spiritual cord sort of thing, energetic cord sort of thing, in my DNA, in my ancestry, and in my genetics. So I'm the whole basis here.
Right. I was going to say that. You've gotten it all.
I'm taking the proverbial divine magic eraser, and let's just go to town and take care of this thing.
Yeah.
I clean all of that out of me, and I replace it with divine love, divine peace, harmony in my relationships, joy, satisfaction, abundance, fun, whatever it is that I want to, because now that this thing that was a problem has been removed, there's a space for something better.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that part is what people miss too. Like they want to remove and push out the things that they know aren't serving them well, but don't necessarily always replace it with something great, right, for them, something that will serve them well. So I love that you said that. Let's now replace this, because you got to replenish, right? So I love that. And I love that you talked about pushing. Everyone is you pushed out. There's an example with a friend who had, at different occasions over the course of 3 years, 3 people pretty much feed into him the same message. And I said I said, you have to pay attention to what's happening right now and think about what's happening in your world that potentially resonates with the things that people are telling you. Like, it's not for no reason. You know what I mean? Nothing to me happens for no reason. So it's like, you got to really think about who you are and what's happening inside and why this message keeps coming to you now over the course of a 3-year period. So I love that you said everyone is you pushed out, and you got to take a look inside. And we're going to have to end the show very soon, but I wanted you to give people some last words. And I hate when we get to this point, everybody, because everything that he's been sharing has been so amazing. But what would be the last words for our audience today?
Well, I've got a gift I'd love to give to all of you guys, totally for free. If you go, when you go to growthfarming.com, scroll down, probably midway through, or there's a little banner at the top that says "Start Here." It's a free ebook, and it's basically everything that we've been talking about tonight. I am very big on, let's make this spiritual growth, personal development process fun. Why does it have to be so serious? And so I've got this book called Why So Serious? And like we've talked about before, you watch Marvel movies, I watch Star Wars, I watch a little bit of Marvel. Why do we watch that stuff? It's entertainment. Yes, we can get some powerful spiritual truths from that. And yes, God can speak to us in very unique ways, but the thing that got us there was something that we were enjoying. And so I am very intentional, and it's a big part of what the Growth Farming platform is about. Like, let's make this process not have to be such a serious endeavor, because we're going to work against ourselves unless we get out of our own way and experience creativity, experience fun, experience enjoyment, allow there to be a levity to this process. And I really believe, you were asking about, how do you write these stories? How did I write 40 stories, short novels last year? I got out of my own way and I had fun. So we can do this if we will allow ourselves to. And I think I was going to make one more point about like simple things to do to rewrite your story. Choose to.
That's amazing. Absolutely. And listen, one thing that God gives us, right, is the power of choice. That is in our control to choose, which direction to go to choose what we're going to do with our lives. He gives us the power of choice. So I love that you said that. And I want to just make another point. You said, get out of your own way. So choose to get out of your own way and do things differently, everybody. I thank you so much for being here. This has been absolutely amazing. I love this. Everybody, make sure that you go to growthfarming.com. You can get that free ebook, and make sure that you connect with the Growth Farming community. If you want to, just awaken your spirituality and do it in a fun way, D. Grant Smith is your person, and growthfarming.com is where you get it. So we have been just amazed by you and everything that you shared. I would encourage everybody out there to buy some of the books and read some of the stories. There will be some enlightenment there, because I know you've gotten enlightened here on this show this evening. We thank you for joining us. We thank you so much, D. Grant. You'll have to come back as more flourishes from you, because I know it will, especially the way it happens for you. So everybody out there, connect with us again next week right here on The Whole Living Show, and we will see you soon.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I appreciate you.
Thank you.